So President Trump, just in the last handful of days, has floated the idea of opening up sports. Let's play cut 14 here. This is President Trump at his press conference. He's been doing these daily coronavirus press conferences, talking about how much he would like to see sports to come back as a place where people can go, they can gather, they can enjoy themselves, as we have not been able to do for a while now. Take a watch to President Trump here.
Well, the great leaders of sport, and they want to get back. They got to get back. They can't do this. Their sports weren't designed for it. The whole concept of our nation wasn't designed for it. We're going to have to get back. We want to get back soon, very soon.
And I know there are a heck of a lot of Americans across the country. My dad's one of them, producer Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush Magic day in and day out here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. He's eager for sports to return. Just patrons at home watching on TV are being able to go to these games. So it's such a difficult time. But the Major League Baseball is looking at bringing back baseball in May, but with all the games played in Arizona. Pretty interesting what's going on here. What are we to make of the push to restore sports? And also, is it smart at this point in time? What are some of the legal hurdles? How is the entertainment business working out with all of this, film and so forth? I'm pleased to talk about this with Rick French. He is chairman and CEO of French West Vaughan, the award-winning integrated marketing company headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. He also is a Board of Trustees member for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio, the Buddy Holly Educational Foundation, and a managing partner of the feature film company Prix Productions, as well as a co-owner of the Daytona Tortugas minor league baseball team. Rick French joins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Rick, so great to have you, sir. Thanks for joining us today.
Jimmy, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I appreciate your time here. So how are you doing amidst everything, especially as someone who's involved in film production? Not much of that able to go on right now, as well as sports teams. You are the co-owner, as I said, of the Daytona Tortugas. How are things going from that standpoint? And also personally, are you well? Are you healthy?
Well, thank you for asking. I hope you're well, and I hope that all of your listeners and viewers are well. Yeah, I'm doing fine. My family's doing fine. No illnesses. My partner in the ownership of the Daytona Tortugas, however, is about 10 days into a battle with the COVID. He and his wife went out to spring training, and they believe they contracted it there. So it's been a little bit of a battle for them. It's interesting. We're supposed to have our home opener here in 2 days in Daytona. And we're going to celebrate it with a singing of the national anthem and a police escort of our mascots to the Jackie Robinson ballpark, and ask people to join us at home on a Facebook Live event where they can sing the national anthem and toast to the new season. But that's not the same as throwing out that first pitch and having opening day finally come to fruition, which we've been looking forward to for quite some time.
No, of course not. But at the same time, what you're doing is giving people a sense of community, something that they can come together for and enjoy an experience, even if it's online. At least you're bringing them something. Here's why was it important, since you can't have your opener for the Tortugas this week? Why is it so important to at least give fans and community members something?
It's kind of a passage of spring. It's a rite of spring, and it's something that our community, is particularly in Daytona, looks forward to annually. We're among the top drawing minor league teams at the Class Advanced A level of minor league baseball, and it's a big community celebration. And not having that available to the people in the community is something that is painful for them, as beaches are closed down and races at the Speedway at Daytona International are closed, and so. Just giving them something to rally around, especially as they've rallied around us this year. We were one of those 42 teams that somehow found ourselves on Major League Baseball's contraction list or proposed contraction list after the 2020 season. And while we think that may change here and we may not find ourselves in that situation, the community's been amazing and supportive of our efforts to keep minor league baseball in Daytona going forward. We've been there for 100 years, and so we wanted to give them something that showed that we're there with them.
Rick French, co-owner of the Daytona Tortugas, I want to read a paragraph here from an ESPN story that I found pretty interesting. A Major League Baseball and its players are increasingly focused on a plan that could allow them to start the season as early as May and has the support of high-ranking federal public health officials who believe the league can safely operate amid the coronavirus pandemic, sources told ESPN. Now, this is a time where people would be looking to baseball, obviously. So they're trying to give fans something, perhaps, that they can at least enjoy from home, even if they can't go to the stands and be participants. Looks like it may just broadcast. These games take place and be broadcast from Arizona. What do you make of this prospect?
I have mixed feelings about it. I want to see baseball being played, as soon as we safely can. Baseball earns a very high percentage of its annual revenues, each team from the gate, ticket sales, concessions, merchandise, and so on. If you extract all of that away from Major League Baseball, or minor league baseball in our case, it's very difficult to make it work economically, because you still have the player cost, the coaches cost, everything else, but you don't have the revenue there to offset it. And I'm not sure that television revenue is going to make up for that shortfall. And the reason for that is that, in local communities, particularly at the Major League Baseball level, they already have their television contracts in place. That revenue was baked into, how they were doing their annual calculations of overhead. So yes, they would realize that, and maybe they can renegotiate the rights deal for on a national level, but that's not the biggest percentage of what a franchise gets back in value. So you still pay the players, you pay the coaches, you still have to have some game day operations out there, broadcasting abilities, and so on, but you have none of that revenue. So while it would work to get the game back in front of people, and everybody would look forward to it, the teams would take a bath economically on this for whatever period it exists before the CDC determines that it's safe for us to go back home and play our games in Cincinnati or Daytona, as the case may be, where we can start to realize some of that revenue. So I say that I've got mixed feelings on it from an economic standpoint, and from a safety standpoint, you still have to have people at the ballpark, and you've still got to have your groundskeepers. You've still got to have your clubhouse staff. While the players, in theory, could have a 6-degree or 6-foot separation, it's not really practical when you're running the bases. So there's going to be plays at first base. There's going to be plays at second base. You're going to have the catcher right behind the batter. And so I don't know how safe it is. But then again, I don't know how safe golf is right now. The golf courses are open around the country. I've been spending some of my time at the country club I'm a member of, and I see a number of people that are much closer than 6 feet apart in terms of the foursomes and so on. So I'm not a CDC expert or a physician, but I'm not sure that you could adhere to social distancing properly and still play the game.
I think that's such an important point. I mean, when we're talking about sports, and especially when if you want to take the ball, tag the guy, you have to be close to the person. You can't keep 6 feet when you're running to the next base. So there are these challenges. How do you think the Major League Baseball teams and coaches, and of course the senior officials for the league, are considering this as far as going through all the machinations? I mean, the mere fact that they're talking about this is one thing. You also have the legal components. I mean, there's a heck of a lot of red tape, I'm sure, that you have to go through in order to make this happen, get the terms right, all of those kinds of things. Not to mention the sense that, as you were saying, that when you have a game that is played. You can't have fans in there, so then you have the revenue issues where maybe there are some contractual agreements that you won't be able to abide when these games are happening and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure we're going through it thoughtfully. And I know we are. I know we are at the minor league level. I know our parent club, the Cincinnati Reds, are doing the same. It, it's a challenge. I mean, there's the desire to fill this void in the American cultural landscape right now. We're supposed to be playing baseball right now. We're not. People are hungry for some normalcy in their life, and I think they'd love to see baseball being played. I know it would garner significant ratings and probably higher ratings than we might get if we're competing with, the NHL playoffs, the NBA, end of the season and playoffs, and so on. But you have to balance that, the desire for it, with the safety and the fact that we've got to be careful of not continuing to spread it. And here's the reality: the first time one of our players at the major league level tests positive and or then passes the virus on to someone else, now what? Do you just pull them off and quarantine them, or do you continue to play? So in thinking about the idea of doing this, we've got to have a business continuity plan going forward about what happens if. And I'm not sure in all this discussion if Major League Baseball has gotten to that yet. Because there's a high degree of likelihood that you would go out, start these games, someone would contract this. As I said, my business partner contracted it at spring training in Arizona, where the Cincinnati Reds have both their major leaguers and their minor leaguers. And so I just think that that's probably going to happen. And then I think you would have to ask the question of, you just trudge on and take that player off the field? Because if they've been anywhere in close proximity to the other players, now what?
Rick French is our guest. He is co-owner of the Daytona Tortugas minor league baseball team. So just a final question on this topic, and then I want to get to film and entertainment for a moment. Rick, how likely do you think it is that the MLB will actually move forward with this plan as it develops?
I think there's a want, but I don't think it's practical. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but my sense is that I think the White House is urging the commissioners of the league to think about different ways to do it. I'm just not sure that baseball is the sport that is best positioned to do it. For example, I think you could pretty easily do it on the PGA Tour without question. No fans. Players are used to playing in an environment where they go out and play 18 holes by themselves all the time growing up. So going out there and playing in, say, groups of three where you're away from each other on the tee box and you spread apart on the green, that's quite easy. Baseball is not. Football is not. Basketball is not. And hockey is not. Or soccer, for that matter, or the major sports. I think you could probably best do it with golf, but golf doesn't seem to want to do it without the fans. And so my guess is, after thinking it through, it's probably not going to happen. But there have been decisions in Major League Baseball before that have surprised me. So,
well, make no mistake, sports is a big part of our economy and also a big part of people enjoying themselves. They like relaxing, going to a ball game, or at the very least being at home and watching their favorite team play. So it is a very difficult time in that regard, to be sure. Now, Rick French, you are also a film producer, and obviously right now you can't really have films in production, at least if you're shooting. Of course, you can still do the editing and getting movies ready, but right now you can't even go to the movie theaters to watch films. So tell us a little bit about your background in that and where you see the film industry as being at this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. To your point, you can't do any production right now, but you can still continue to work on films that are in development. And that's what I'm doing. I have two very major motion pictures that were scheduled to begin principal photography here this summer. and we're looking at that schedule and trying to decide if that's at all realistic or not. If it isn't, then we have to look at the availability of our stars later in the year, what other commitments they have, other projects, and determine, do we need to recast the film? Can we go forward? It's a challenge. I'm retelling the Buddy Holly story, which was um, first made in 1978, starring Gary Busey. It got a Best Picture nomination, and Gary Busey got a Best Actor nomination. We're telling it through a different lens of how musicians in the late 50s kind of broke the color barrier. Interestingly enough, before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Daytona, in baseball years later, which a lot of people are not aware of. Jackie actually played his first professional game in Daytona Beach at our ballpark before he ever made his way up to Brooklyn. So we're telling a story about how, black, brown, and white musicians really helped break down segregation in the late 50s through the film Clear Lake. And we've been waiting to make big casting announcements around that because of the pandemic and not wanting to look insensitive to that during the time. So that one was planning to go, as well as the NFL survival drama Not Without Hope, which is based off a incident 10 years ago in the Gulf of Mexico where two NFL players and a college football player perished in a tragic boating accident. And there was one survivor that was plucked from the sea after a dramatic Coast Guard rescue. And we've been trying to develop that film for many, many years and have it ready to go and ready to shoot in a couple months. But again, the pandemic has that up in the air. So both of those are very major motion pictures that will be in theaters with worldwide distribution. But everything's uncertain right now as to what we can shoot and when and where, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, Rick French, I think it's incredible that you're telling both of those stories, and I'm looking forward to the Buddy Holly story because I think that's just incredible. And I'm a big music fan, especially blues. As a harmonica player myself, I really enjoy the soul of music and musicians, especially when we were seeing that 40s, 50s, that era too, just in terms of the prowess of musicians to pave the way and go into new territories. Buddy Holly, for example, most certainly did. So with that in mind, I'm looking forward to seeing more as it develops about that. But before we let you go, Rick French, I want to ask you just how you see film and entertainment as moving forward when it comes to this pandemic, and especially as we can start seeing, whenever it happens, things open up a little bit more. How do you think it will progress? How do you hope it will progress too?
Film is interesting because we're now living in a Netflix world, and a lot of the studios have broken their theatrical windows in an effort to get some of this content out there while people are at home. So I think the theatrical window between when a movie is released and when you might see it on cable or on Netflix is going to shorten or completely evaporate to where you can watch it wherever and however you want to watch it. I think that's coming as a result of consumer behavior changing here, and that's going to have an impact on theaters and the way we go out and spend Friday and Saturday nights, for example. I think that we're seeing a real change in live music right now. Uh, Everyone in the music business is known for a long time that touring is where you make all your money because we live in a singles world now where albums are not consumed the way they used to be 20, 30 years ago. And singles are downloaded and quite frankly paid for via streaming online services where the artists get paid fractions of a penny for each play, and so they have to make their money through live touring. Well, now live touring is stopped. So now what? What you're finding is these artists are spending a lot of time live streaming individual personalized shows, acoustic shows from their home right now to keep their fans engaged. And that may be a new way that they realize they can realize revenue. so that it doesn't necessarily have to be going out in these big package tours. But I think certain artists are going to find that they can turn from what they're doing now, in most cases free, into private in-home concerts that are subscribed to by people. And I think that will be a model that a lot of artists will start to follow. In professional sports, I think it's a little different. I think that sports are built around fandom and people being in the stadium, sharing that common support for a team and common purpose. I think that will come back, but I think it's going to be a little slow. I think that I've seen a lot of reports about the pent up demand in both the concert space and professional sports. And while I think there's some truth to that, and I think there will be people that will absolutely be eager to get back out there and go to a live performance, there's going to be fear on the part of some people to put themselves into crowds before there's a vaccine, before that they know that this pandemic and this virus is under control. And I think that even when the economy opens back up, you're still going to see people decide that, you know what, until I'm certain about my health or the exposure that I could create for loved ones or coworkers, maybe I'm going to stay on my couch and watch this or consume these things a little differently than I might otherwise. And I think that's going to have a hangover for a good long period of time, regardless of what some of these optimists and economists are saying about this. They're just not being realistic about consumer behavior and how people deal with fear.
Sure. No, I think that's so well put. And just two observations. One, I'm deeply disappointed. I love going to live concerts, Red Rocks, other venues. Always just one of the highlights of my year is being able to go to different concerts. And then also, I think it's interesting you bring up albums and tours, because as I've talked with others in the music business who have said that it used to be where tours were a supplement to albums to promote the albums. Now it's the other way around. An album is more to get people to go show up to your tours. So it's so interesting how that works out. Rick French, co-owner of the Daytona Tortugas minor league baseball team, film producer, board member for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We got to talk about that sometime and more. So great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Jimmy, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy your show.
Thank you very much. Rick French joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. We're going to take a